success stories told by the people who lived them.
We're going to have some guests on this show that everybody knows, and we're going to have guests on this show that nobody knows yet.
One by one, Nick Hyder is adding hits to the Hitstreak.
Blessings, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Hitstreak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder, and in the Hit Lab with me today, I got somebody that's very special to me. I'm proud to call him a friend. I have none other than the founder and CEO of ScaleFactor, Chad Cannon. Chad, what's happening, baby?
Nick, man, what a pleasure to be here. This is such a great space, but I've been a big fan of yours for a while, so it's just an honor to be here, so thanks.
Dude, thank you very, very much. That's our first hit of the day. I like that one.
Love it.
You can keep those coming all day long, baby. The founder and CEO of ScaleFactor, but your story is unbelievable. So first of all, you're local.
Absolutely, right here in Nashville. My wife and I met here 20 years ago. Been here 12 of the last 20 with a little pit stop in California, but happy to call Nashville home.
Absolutely, and you're wearing a label over there that is one of my favorite joints in town, and you frequent it a lot more than I do, right?
Yeah, it's Troubadour's not a bad place to be. You know, golf, one of the best golf courses here in town, and just a great community. We call it home, and it's been a special place. Community, the people there, it's second to none.
Well, it is a fantastic golf course. It's hard as heck too.
It's not easy. You know, I just picked up the game 2 years ago, and goal was to break 80. I think I shot 80 12 times before I finally broke it there. I finally broke it this summer with a 78. So,
dude, that's killer.
Yeah, it was a good round.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Well, folks, let me tell you a little bit about old Chad Cannon. Literally was a vice president at 23 years old, 6 months out of college. You have how many 7-figure to 8-figure businesses have you been a part of in your career, man? I mean, it's
five or six.
Wow.
Yep.
Man, that's incredible. You have led over 30 New York Times bestselling campaigns.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride getting to work with incredible thought leaders who have a message for the world and helping them be strategic, how to leverage their social media and the brands. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure.
So check it out, folks. So obviously you're like, all right, we've got your attention, and you need to check him out on social, right? So you can follow Chad at ccannon21 on Instagram, and the ScaleFactor company is at ScaleFactor Co. Their website is scale-factor.co and 7factorsofscale.com.
Yep.
Anything that you're doing, if you want it to grow, you got to scale it, right? So
100%.
This appeals to everybody. So let's go back a little bit. So to do all this stuff, you probably have 14 degrees, and you probably went to school for 40 years.
Exactly. No, just like everyone else, I went to school right after high school. Was a double major, business management, sports management. Actually want to do sports management, but realized I only had to take 2 more classes to get a dual degree, and just started working really hard. Grew up in the Midwest, was taught hard work, and just that's paid off over the years.
And so you just have you basically, we talk about this a lot with all of our teammates and companies that we invest in. At the end of the day, especially if you're young, I feel like the education system spits everybody out in the same spot. You got the same amount of information in the same amount of time, and then it's what you decide to do with it after that.
Wtally.
That determines your altitude in this life, right? So you walked out with a four-year degree and a double major, and what were those majors again?
Sports management and business management.
All right, so I can understand how the business management may apply. The sports part, I don't see that in there.
No. Well, it's actually a big part of my story in that I just like you, I love baseball. I actually came to Nashville, met my wife working for the Nashville Sounds. I had to have an internship.
That's right.
That internship, the guy that hired me taught me basically everything I think I needed in sales. In one day.
Who was that?
Brent High, local Nashville legend here.
Brent is awesome.
Yeah, Brent's amazing. And just super thankful. He was instrumental in so many areas of our life. He was actually the officiant of our wedding, my wife and I.
Oh, wow.
And ended up at my last role with Michael Hyatt Co in Full Focus, ended up hiring him back on our sales team. And it was kind of just came full circle where overnight he became our number one sales rep. Brought him on the team. So
incredible. Everything that dude touches is really, really good. And then he's got a son that's equally as awesome.
Yep. A couple sons. Yeah. One, graduated a couple years ago. The other one's going to UT to play baseball next year.
Been keeping up with him. He's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Great kid.
So you had a great internship, and those absolutely matter. And that's one of the ways that we like to give back as well, is to invest into young people that are working on some stuff. So you got out of school, then what?
Yeah, so came to Nashville and actually worked for a company called Third Coast Sports, where we did 32 events in 16 markets. Partnered with minor league stadiums where we did a pregame concert. It was faith-based, so one of the players would share their testimony. We would sell group tickets. Super successful. That summer, I had to learn how to run the business, accounting, all of that right out of the gate.
Wow.
21, 22. My wife and I decided that wasn't the life we wanted, being on the road, minor league, making pennies on the dollar when you calculate your hourly rate.
That's right.
So we moved to California. My sister had moved there and went to work for a company called Outreach, booking speakers. And 6 months into that, I was 23 at the time, got promoted to running that piece of the company with 7 divisions. I was kind of lucky. It was probably the redheaded stepchild of the organization, where it was just like, hey, we're going to give you a year to turn this thing around. But one of the things, the CEO called me one day, and I didn't even know the CEO knew who I was. It was 120 employees. We were a $1 million piece of the business, but the company was about a $40 million company. And you just never, I think this is a lesson looking back. People are like, hey, how did this work? And it's like, you always got to be ready. You always got to be ready for, when you're up to bat, now the cool hip thing to say is take your shot.
I love it.
That slang wasn't there back then, but I got a call from him. He's like, hey, I'd love to just pick your brain and grab coffee. And I'm like, why is the CEO calling me? Like, I'm been here 6 months. And just talking with other people, they're like, it's probably a big conversation. Just be prepared for anything.
What's that CEO doing today?
Still running the company. Kind of long story short, I was there for another 6 years and got promoted to running kind of the bigger piece of the company. And they moved from California to Colorado Springs. And the next thing for me was running that business. He's only 52, 53 now. I'll be 40 next year. So, I wasn't, he was a very active owner. So, that was the place for me to transition out. And it was incredible. We grew that piece of the business, quadrupled it in 18 months,
Wow.
to the point where it was like, okay, I want you to come in and take over the business that was about 75% of the revenue. And that was in 2007, pre-recession, and just got to sit at the table with 10 other leaders, probably 20 years older than me, other than the owner, and just learned a lot that set me up for success. Talked my way into a VP of marketing role in the book publishing space in Nashville. We wanted to be back in Nashville. I knew nothing about book publishing, let alone to be a VP of marketing. Funny story on that is the guy that hired me really put his neck out on the line to hire me. We connected through the interview process. The CEO, the HR person didn't want to hire me. And mainly because publishing is pretty traditional. They wanted an older cat with experience and not a young buck that's going to come in and change things. But my boss, the publisher, was like, hey, publishing needs a change, and I want someone young. And so, it worked out. I'm super thankful. That team had launched 1 New York Times bestseller in the last 50 years, and we did 30 in about 4.5 years.
So, I got to make a note here because we got to talk about what was the differences on that. So I'm going to put just bestseller here. But first of all, I don't know that CEO. I don't even know his name, right? But I'm going to say I got to give him a compliment because he saw something in somebody very young in their career, and not many CEOs reach out to a rookie and say, hey, man, I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
100%. And it was an interesting conversation. He said, hey, I've been seeing the sales numbers. There was a team of 3 sales reps, and there was a GM running the organization. He said, hey, I'm letting the GM go. He hasn't been showing me the numbers, but I looked at the numbers. You've accounted for 80% of our sales team's numbers, but the sales team we weren't hitting our goals, but I was doing 250% of sales goals, but everyone else was like at 10, 20%. And, he was covering for everyone and just kind of, showing the team results. And so he said, hey, I'm 2 things. One, we're either going to shut this division down, but I see something in you and would love to keep you here, or, I'm going to give you 48 hours to come up with a business plan. and you can run the, and then if we as an executive team like it,
no pressure,
we'll give it to you.
No pressure.
And I said, well, funny that you ask. I've actually got one right here, because I had already been building the case for if I got asked for that at bat, what would I do? And so I told him, hey, here's the 3 or 4 things I would do. He said it was after work coffee, and he said, the job's yours. I'm introducing you to the exec team tomorrow. I want you to share this vision with them. And off to the races we went.
Jeez. So your first, was that one of your first big old presentations that really mattered because
Totally.
you're talking to the board? Or?
Yeah. It was, it was at that point, it's nothing big. It was a $500,000 company or division of the company, losing about $400,000 a year. Get that. I don't understand how a speakers bureau loses money when, we make 15% of the, it just boggles my mind.
Yeah.
So I got my head under the financials and really wiped the staff clean, hired an assistant, really just ended up building it to 7 or 8 people, $4 million. And I remember, man, if I can ever get this to 7 figures and make this thing profitable, I will have made it. At 23, because I grew up blue collar. My parents never made more than 6 figures combined. My dad was a general foreman on construction jobs from age 18. My dad had leadership all over him, and had so many opportunities where people said, "Hey, I want you to be a business partner on this general contractor." He was an iron worker, but he just never took the risk.
Yeah.
And I love him to this day. But, I can remember conversations at dinner where, he's like, "Hey, people want me to do this, this, and this." And he just didn't have enough confidence in himself to do it.
Yeah.
And so part of my journey is overcoming kind of that confidence to be put yourself out there and go after what you desire and you want in an entrepreneurial journey.
Coach Burt said something that I'd heard it before, but never the way he had put it. And it's so brilliant. He said, your brain is its main function. It's there to protect you, to survive, but not to thrive.
Yeah,
right.
That's really good. Yeah,
you have to train it to thrive, and that's the way that we're built, is to survive, not necessarily to thrive.
100%.
And that generation was a different generation. They had been taught something really totally different, and it was just a different world. My parents had a lot of the same type of mindset when it came to like they were just providing, and they didn't take risks because it would affect us, and so on and so forth. Who knows what they could have achieved if they had taken more risks.
Totally. Yeah. And it's generational,
Absolutely.
And you can take this type of risk and you can create value by helping other people, whether it's through business or through investments. It changes your family's generation, and that's what gets me excited about what we're doing really at ScaleFactor, is coming along business owners that maybe have this mindset or have taken over for their family, and they're kind of breaking, they're hitting a ceiling in their business they don't know how to get past, where we've got a proven model to kind of help them go to that next level. Because what local, not just local, but small businesses, they get to a ceiling where they, anything that they do next, they've never done before. And so they need someone that's been there, that's done that, that's maybe led other companies to do that. And that's what we're committed to, because it changes generations, not only for that family, but families in that local community, and giving jobs. I mean, that's what this is all about.
We, had a conversation with my son this morning about, how, winning takes all of you, and it doesn't. It's not loyal, and it doesn't care. And I'm always telling him, loyalty one way is dumb, but at the same time, when it comes to winning, that's the way it works.
100%.
That's the exception to the rule. But you made a great statement there about the small businesses. Everybody, when you dream big in the beginning, it's not really big. It's big at the moment.
100%.
And then you grow into it, and then you got to keep dreaming big.
Yep.
And Marcus Whitney said something to me one time. He said, "Nick, once you master what you're doing right now, your whole life changes."
Yes.
And I was like, holy crap, that's true for everybody. The moment that whatever it is that's beating you, the moment you master it, your entire life is different, the whole outlook and layout. Yeah,
it's one thing I've learned about, as you lack of a better term, get higher up in the food chain. You start having, you start having dinners and coffees with people that are changing the world. They're running 4 or 5 companies. Is one of the things I've always taken away, is that, where I grew up, it would be like, there's no way you could do that. There's not enough time in the day. But guess what? Winners make that time, and when they take, and they start figuring out, okay, hey, I can do this, this, and this. It doesn't take, 40 hours a week doing one thing, which is what, sometimes corporate America wants you to think, or 60 hours. It's when you're an entrepreneur, time is what? You know, right. It's helping people, it's leading, it's taking your team to the next level. And sometimes that could be 30 hours, sometimes it could be 80. You just never know.
I've found a couple years ago, I was talking about Marcus Whitney. He came and spoke to our team of insurance agents, and the whole thing he spoke about wasn't about sales. It wasn't about marketing. It was about budgeting time and how you invest your time and how you budget your money, but you don't budget your time. And he's like, well, which one's truly most valuable? I've seen all the successful people, they figure out how to get the most out of their time. They get more out of 24 hours than the person next to them does.
Absolutely.
All right. So became the VP. So I was going to ask you, what was the biggest difference that you did from, you said it was one bestseller in decades versus how many in a couple years?
40.
40? Golly.
Yep.
Hold on. That gets all day long, man.
Yeah. It's, I was sitting in a meeting with the sales team, and, it was Max, they were brainstorming a Max Lucado book, Max's upcoming book. And they said, hey, Max's team would really like for this to kind of come out strong and hit a New York Times bestseller. And I said,
kidding.
Well, yeah, who wouldn't, And so what do we know about the list and what's the formula and all this stuff? And, they keep it pretty hidden under wraps, and it's changed over time, especially as online marketing has become a thing. And, people have these built-in audiences, and it's different than what publishing once was. That, it's pre-orders drive a big chunk of it. That's what they told me in this meeting. And I said, okay. So I've been here 3 weeks, and we've talked a lot about marketing. We've never talked about driving pre-orders. We're spending no marketing dollars pushing pre-orders. We're not leveraging our audience for pre-orders. So right then and there, I'm like, okay, well, that's one thing we got to fix. If pre-orders account for potentially 60 or 70% of what the Times looks at, let's spend 60, 70% of our money.
That's right.
That's pretty easy, And at that time, it was the rise of social media. That was when, I joke now, that was like back when Facebook, could do, it was like stealing candy from a baby at that point. It was like you were getting CPLs for pennies and, leads for dollars, not tens of dollars.
That's right.
In today's world. And we started working with authors for 9 or 10 months. And if you're an author listening to this, you hear a lot that publishers don't help. And that's the reality. Unfortunately, the publisher puts it back on the author. But we just said, hey, we're going to be author centric, and we're going to work with an author for 2 years to, be a strategic partner. It doesn't mean that we're doing something for them every 2 years, but we're communicating, telling them what's working, what's not working, how to build your brand so that when it does come time to leverage it, you have an engaged audience, all of that. And we're going to leverage that to push book sales. And that was when Facebook pages were big, and email lists were just kind of starting, and blogging was still a thing. I mean, podcasts weren't even there, at that point. And so it was just kind of the last couple of years is when podcasts really became a thing, and YouTube channels and all of that. But we were just kind of coming into the 21st century of marketing, which book publishing just hasn't done. And I ended up kind of towards the latter time there, a lot of the A-list authors came to me and said, hey, what would it look like for you to come work for me and help, not only just help sell more books, but help build my brand, generate more emails? How do we build products and all of that? Like that time at publishing helped me realize, man, the authors and thought leaders are sitting on so much intellectual property, and they don't know how to build a business off of it. So I said, well, let me explore it. And I started an agency, Chadwick Cannon Agency, and that's where I left the publishing space, and grew that to almost $2 million in the first 18 months.
Wow.
We had 15 people, and it was primarily working directly with brands as yourself. Hey, what do you want to do? What's the next 3 to 5 years look like? How do we build a plan to do that? How do we build social media following, email list? What products do we want to create that ultimately add value to your audience? And scaled a lot of brands. Michael Hyatt was a client. He was one of my first clients. He tried to hire me right after I announced that I was starting the agency. And I said, hey, I've got 3 big clients. I can't come work for you. I've got commitments. And so I ended up working as a contractor, helping them build out their employee-based marketing team. They were about a 7-figure business at that time, 6 years ago when I started. 18 months came in. They were unfortunately 10% of the agency's revenue, but 50% of my personal time. So I had a conversation and said, hey, we've got to come up with an exit plan. And, they were super gracious about it. And 2 days later they said, hey, what would it like for us to hire you? And I made them an offer I didn't think they'd say yes to. And so I transitioned out of the agency to work full time with Michael Hyatt Company, which is now Full Focus. We rebranded kind of the last year, and grew from 7 figures to a mid 8-figure business over those 6 years, and learned so much. And I'm so thankful for that opportunity. Getting to work so closely with Michael was just a thrill, and him being able to kind of allow me to really thrive in an employee-based role as an entrepreneur. People call it entrepreneur, but Michael really gave me the opportunity to really be an entrepreneur inside of his business, with him taking all the risk, which was really, really fun.
Wow. There's I have 2 words that I wrote down earlier when we were talking about chances. Another word for chance is maybe it's an opportunity. And somebody's taking a chance on you, but they're giving you an opportunity at the same time. Michael Hyatt is obviously really good at what he does, and he made an investment. He took a chance and an investment on you, and I'd say it worked pretty well.
Yeah, it did. I would like to think so. And I think he would say that too. What he paid me and what I had told him, kind of the offer, thinking he would say no.
Yeah.
He saw a bigger picture and a bigger vision. A lot of people ask me, hey, what made Michael different in this space of like online marketers and entrepreneurs that were just personalities that ultimately built a legitimate business that had products that weren't based on him, and built a real brand out of it. And I said, honestly, he was willing to take risks before anyone else was, and hire really smart people that were, I wouldn't say I'm smarter than Michael, but in his, he's like, I always want to hire people smarter than me. Where you see a lot of these online entrepreneurs that have a course they sell once a year or different things, they're just hiring a bunch of, lack of a better term, minions to just do, not like people at the same level strategically and all of that, where they've got to invest in at an executive team level. Michael was developing an executive team well before the company had the resources to do it.
That's right.
And to be honest, not just me, but the other executives that were there, they were pushing the ball down the field and, trying to keep up with Michael and his vision, and in fact, getting ahead of him is what caused us to scale at a level that, our peers just were kind of, marveled at.
Right. My dad used to tell me when he was in the music business, and he was in a band for decades. And they were playing all over the country, but he always told me that, like, the coolest part about Dad being in the music business is they were always recording demos, or he's producing something, and I was always hanging out with these amazing musicians. Half of them were like his band was where they would do side gigs or fun stuff and everything else. But he always told me, he said, I was always the worst person in the band, and that's how I knew we were good.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of security in yourself to do that. That's a fundamental flaw I see a lot. And people surround themselves with people that you are the average of the people you spend your time with. So
totally.
if everybody around you is better than you at certain things, then you're going to grow too. You know what I mean? So that's a fundamental flaw.
As a Yankees fan, this is a quote I heard from George Steinbrenner in college that I still live to this day. And people asked him, what allowed you to be so successful? He said, I hired people smarter than me. And that is something that I've always tried to live by. Is if you're going to hire people smarter than you, it also means if you're an A player, that means those people are A+ players, which means you're going to have to do things that maybe are out of your comfort zone to keep them. A players right now, Aaron Judge, Yankees just paid $360 million to keep him. We were kind of talking off camera before. Hal, George's son, called him up before and said, "Hey, do you want to be a Yankee? Are you invested in being here?" It's what he really wanted to know. Rumors that he was hours away from signing a $320 million deal with the Giants. And Aaron Judge said one word, yes. And Hal said, here's $40 million more, 320 to 360. And he's a Yankee.
That's right.
And knowing how to keep those people smarter than you is important, which means that you're also going to have an investment, and you're also maybe dealing with some tough personalities potentially. That's right. Players typically aren't, the status quo people.
All right. So that's a great question. Like, you're right. They are not your average person. They're different, which means like they get labeled a lot.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So what's the key that you found to being able to relate to all these different A-type personalities that are, larger than life people?
Yeah. More than anything, you gotta hear them out, and you've also got to be willing to ask them because I think most people are really afraid to ask them, well, what do you want? what would success look like for you in this organization long term? It's something Michael asked me a lot. We went through I can remember, went through a pretty hard conversation one time where I was ready to leave.
Gotcha.
A couple years back, and it was, doesn't matter what the circumstances were. And I called him. It was the 4th of July, and I said, hey, I'm really struggling with this. He stopped everything and said, let's meet at the office and talk face to face, and I gained so much respect from him.
That's a great leader.
To do that. Yeah. And I had,
great leader.
It wasn't like, hey, you got to do this or else. Like, I didn't need to have that conversation that day.
Right.
But Michael wanted to have that conversation. And to me, it was like, he's invested in me being here. Mm-hmm. And we didn't hammer anything out in that conversation, but we wrestled, compensation wise, but we wrestled a lot of things to the ground where I realized I was valued and I wanted to be here. And, not every employee is worth that, but one of the things I learned from Michael is that he felt like I was.
All right. So, what led to, was first of all, everybody's like ScaleFactor. We've heard that recently before, and that's because your partner, Josh Hotzenpiller, was a recent guest. His episode just came out. And, so you guys are doing something that I think is phenomenal, right? So how did you get from working with Hyatt to this?
Yeah, great question. So one of the product lines that we built with Michael Hyatt was a coaching program called Business Accelerator, which was a coaching program geared towards multi-million-dollar businesses working directly with their CEOs and executive teams on how to really grow their business, accelerate growth faster than they were doing themselves. And that was kind of my baby. It was one of the things that we grew to a multiple 8-figure business. It's now equating probably 60% of the company's revenue. 4 years ago, it didn't exist. Now it's the biggest piece of their business. But I was the CMO of the company where we launched the Full Focus Planner, which was a physical product that has sold millions of copies to this day, and transitioned to say, hey, I feel like we really need to build a sales team and sell this coaching program. And it's a long story how we got there. But I sold the first 500 seats to that program as a depending price point, $15,000 to $45,000.
Good Lord, that's fantastic.
Building out a sales team, and in doing so, ended up talking to thousands of business owners. Asking them, hey, what's been your growth for the last year? What are the challenges you're facing to grow and to scale? What are the, all of these conversations that business owners don't get to have with a lot of people, and it's like somewhat of a therapy session. But I started realizing, one, there's a lot of ways to make money in this world.
That's right.
Number one. Number two, there are a lot of people that have no idea what they're doing, and they're scared, and it's this imposter syndrome of like, man, when's the team going to figure out that I'm just making it up as I go on the fly every day?
Wow.
But but they're also extremely smart, and every mountain they climb from here on out, they've never done it before. They're going to climb a new mountain every time, and so started just getting into every different industry, what we didn't focus on any industry, to the point where I was just like, man, this is gold, and so I left in April. So I've been out, we're recording this in December, 8 months ago. I've been consulting, and actually I went out to California. Josh is a good friend. I've known him for about 15 years, and did something for his company where I kind of mapped out, did a strategy session for the day. And the next day he called me and he's like, hey, this is amazing. Like, if I would have had this for the 3 or 4 companies that I started and exited, we would have grown. We would have had more multiple bottom line when we exited. This is something we should explore doing together. And then we started really wrestling to the ground. Okay, like, what made these companies that were really successful in our coaching program and accelerator program really scale, and those that didn't? And same thing with Josh, his businesses. And we really identified what we said are 7 factors of scale, 7 factors that businesses that really grow and scale to the next level, what do they have a game plan for versus those that don't? And we said, man, we just got to get this out there. And so just this week, we launched the website, we launched our own podcast, which is called ScaleFactor, and we really dive into each of those factors. Each episode in season 1 will be a deep dive into those factors, which we're excited about. And we've been having these conversations with business owners, and they're, it's so easy to relate to when you start to really think through, hey, these 7 factors. And most of the time, a business is doing well in 3 or 4 of them, but 3 or 4 of them they're really struggling in. And the thing about business, to really scale, you've got to be doing all of them at the same time. That's right. Have a game plan to be doing that.
That's right. So, what have you found in your experience has been? I mean, I'm sure that it's like just like anything else. You see a lot of like the people that are winning. There's 7 things they're all doing really, really well. What are some of the most common things or causes of growth barriers that you see that for folks you've helped?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it really depends. There are certain things based on the size of your business.
Okay.
So if you're just at near 7 figures, you're cresting that $1 million mark, or you're just past it. The next kind of domino to fall is 3 million. A lot of people think it's 5, but it's really 3. One of the things we've seen, and so a lot of times, depending on your business,
why is that?
Because depending on your business, what I was going to say is the CEO and the founder. They're typically kind of the rainmaker.
Mm-hmm.
They can just get to that point just by sheer will.
Okay.
It may be, depending on the business, maybe they have a couple people working for them, but just by sheer will, they can get there. They don't have to have systems set up. They could be making it up literally every day.
Yeah.
And you can build $1 million to $3 million business.
Okay.
But to get from 3 to 10, you need good people, you need good systems, you need game plan for how you're going to get there. And then from 10 to 30, a lot of times the CEO and the founder can't get out of their own way. A lot of times it's helping the founder and the CEO get clear on what only they can do. You talk about prioritizing time. CEOs that are just like, man, I have to do it all. If I don't do it, it won't get done right.
Guilty.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is you're spending too much time on the things that aren't actually the most important. And every new mountain you climb, the next thing that's the most important changes. When you're running a $10 million company, it's
That's
no
right.
longer, building or creating product. It's actually leading the team to create the product and execute and all of that. And some people just don't like that. They don't like being a leader. They actually like being hands-on, and they end up being the barrier to their growth. John Maxwell calls it the law of the lid.
Okay.
At some point you become the lid on your business. And so every business this happens to. If you're a business owner listening to this, it's probably happened to you. Some of you may still be stuck. You haven't hit the lid yet. If you haven't, it's coming. If you have, there's probably something that helped you. Maybe it was a course. Maybe it was something someone said to help you get out of that. And realize, man, I'm doing, sometimes it's 70% the wrong things.
Wow.
We could spend a strategy session with the business owner, and a lot of times it's like, okay, well, you don't need to do that anymore. And it's just habit, it just ends up becoming that thing. And it's funny that, people grow 20, 30% year over year. You see people that are in that $3 to $5 million range, depending on the business. It's like, man, I'm stuck. I can't get past that 5. And it's such a common problem, because there's some things you got to do. And a lot of it is layers of leadership inside your organization, systems, processes to get to 10 million. It's not typically product. Sometimes it is, depending on kind of the business. But this is broad brushstrokes based on kind of overarching themes. But what I found working with small businesses and even large businesses, 80% of the problems are all the same. Everyone's like, you don't know my business. My business is unique. 10 to 20% of your business is unique, and within a few questions, I can really understand what the uniqueness is and then how to plan for it. But 80% of the problems are the same.
Okay. So what are some of the most common ones that you see with CEOs and founders that create when they create that lid?
Yeah. So a lot of it is they're just involved in everything. They feel like they've got to be involved in everything, and they don't trust their staff.
Delegate.
Yeah. Delegate's a big one. The one thing that I see time and time again, which is our first factor in the 7 factors of scale, is find your buyer. The buyer that got you here typically isn't the buyer that's going to get you there.
Let's go ahead and list these 7 right now. Right? So I did this with Josh.
Yeah.
And you can, and I've actually been studying them myself.
Yeah. So first, you can follow the acronym. It's factors. So F is find your buyer.
Okay.
2 is align your brand. 3 is create the products. And a funny story there, Josh and I really argued around what's first. We try to do this in sequential order. If we were to say, hey, if what's the most important to get to scale? And I was really around the product side of things.
Okay.
And Josh was all about find your buyer.
All right.
And needless to say, he won that battle because find your buyers first.
Right.
And not because we just wanted to force it into an acronym. It just happened to really work that way.
I love it. So find your buyer. Then what's the number 2?
Align your brand.
Align. I'm writing here if you're not watching.
Which is all about getting clear, how do you communicate to make sure that you are talking to the buyer.
So your brand message pretty much, right? Got it.
And what got you to maybe $1 million or $2 million isn't the product that's going to get you to 10 or 30 typically.
Okay.
You look at Facebook. How did Facebook grow? Like they didn't grow. They didn't start to be an advertising platform that is 95% margin.
Right.
Like that happened as they started realizing that, hey, we've got an audience and it's advertising. Amazon, they started out selling books. Like they never thought they'd have Amazon Web Services, but the product that's going to get you from growth to scale typically isn't the same. At Michael Hyatt Company, we were, through year 3 of the business, 98% of our revenue was online courses. Today, it's less than 2%. It's totally flopped, totally flipped. And we saw something where online courses were where we said collecting digital dust. People, it was a crowded market, especially in the personal development, self-development space. It's like, why are they going to buy from us versus anyone else? Even though we've got a massive audience and trust and authority with Michael as the personality. We wanted to build a business that we didn't have to rely on a personality. So that's why we launched the Full Focus Planner, which is a physical product, and ultimately the coaching program, and they were branded without Michael's name. And if we weren't, and the buyer changed. At first, we started because he was big on social media and blogging around productivity and leadership. So the first $3 million in that company was like literally the fanboys and fangirls of Michael Hyatt online. That's how we built the business. But at a point, there becomes a ceiling on that.
That's right.
You got to start getting people and adding value that don't know who Michael is and getting them to do that. And so if we were just saying, hey, like, we're just happy doing online courses, it would have been a $5 million business and it would have been highly profitable, and we would have had, but not a mid-8 figure business that's got a totally different market share and value. So that's why I find your buyer one, because you first have to get clear that the buyer if the product's going to change, the buyer's going to change. That's their motivation, all of that. So align your brands 2. 3 is create the products.
Okay.
And we have a whole kind of product, this idea around 10% of your current customers will pay 10x what they're currently paying. So let's say you've got.
Hold on a minute. That's a good one. Let's say that one again.
Yeah. So 10% of your current customers will pay 10 times what they're currently paying. And I learned this in a mastermind with Jeff Walker probably 5 or 6 years ago. We were at Blackberry Farm, and we started using that when we started thinking about, hey, what's the value we want to add in the different products? We used this time and time again, and it played out, not only for us, but for businesses we were coaching. So for example, if you've got 1,000 people paying you $1,000 a year, and a product is $1,000. It means you have 100 people that's going to be willing to pay you $10,000. You've got 10 people that are willing to pay you $100,000. Just quick, easy math and easy numbers. Obviously, you got to do the work to make sure there's a value prop and great brand and great communication of that.
Right.
But that is so if you can start to get 10,000, 20,000 people in your audience, and think about a podcast, we play this out all the time because we do a lot of work with brands that have podcasts. Yeah. And I would say a podcast is almost as equal to someone buying a book. So gotcha. $20, the average book is $20. So if you're getting 200,000 people downloading an episode, because, no one really cares about $20 when they're buying a book. When people make a book buying decision, this was something that we use in the publishing space. Every book buyer has $20 to drop on a book. The question they're really asking is, do I have the time to consume this content?
That's right.
And so, talk about a podcast. Someone's willing to spend 45 minutes, consuming your content in between their ears multiple times. That customer is worth something.
That's right.
So just easy, to say, okay, let's say you get 200,000 downloads, so $20. That means you're going to have 20,000 that are willing to pay you $200, 2,000 that are willing to pay you $2,000, 200 that's willing to pay you 20, and then 20 that's willing to pay you 200,000. Is the way that plays out, and start to think through that. And it's really fun to be in the room with a business owner when you start to think, okay, here's a price tag for a product you could create. What is that product you'd want to create? Incredible, man. I've never heard it said that way. As I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm like, it just makes so much sense. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So T, we'll finish this. So T is tell the story.
Okay.
So this is how do you leverage testimonials? How do you capture people that you're really, because align your brands, the communication. So tell the stories. How are you replicating your market value in the market? Which best way to do that is through testimonials. O is operating model. This is all the nerdy stuff that, if you're a COO of the operation. So how do I operate my business? That's the O. R is repeatable sales motion. And R is that alignment between sales and marketing. How do we, this is where we nerd out on funnels. I've got a marketing and sales background. I've kind of bounced back and forth in CMO and CSO roles, kind of in all of my kind of journey and story, is this alignment between sales and marketing. And a lot of business coaching or frameworks, they don't touch sales and marketing. Right. Because it's kind of the wild, wild west a little bit. There's always more, what I always say about marketing is there's always more you can do. Like there's no beginning and an end to marketing.
That's correct.
Creativity.
You cannot promote too much. You can't market too much.
Yeah. And then S is just scale the business. So if you do those first 6 factors well, scale will happen, but you have to understand, what do you want out of the business? Do you want an exit? Do you want to invest back into the business? But you need to have clarity so that you can know how to grow. If you're not looking to sell the business, but you're looking to invest back and continue to add greater value and see this as an investment, then it's not about how much you take home that year. It's how much you're putting back into the business. And some people say, hey, I want to take that much home. Okay. That provides us some strategies around how do we want to build that business and grow the business and ultimately scale it.
Those are fantastic and like really, really good. I learned a long time ago that like if you're creating a business or really anything, you need to create it with the end in mind. And so it reminds me a lot of a GPS. It only works if you type in the end destination. Totally. You know what I mean? Those are fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Find your buyer, align your brand, create products, tell the story, operating model, repeatable sales motion, and scale the business. I could even read my own writing, which is a plus.
It's a miracle.
It is today, right? So there we go. Awesome. So once again, folks, we've got Chad Cannon, the founder and CEO of ScaleFactor. You can find him on Instagram at ccannon21. You can check out ScaleFactor, the company, on Instagram at ScaleFactor Co. Scale-factor.co is their website, 7factorsofscale.com. And man, I think we're just really getting into the good stuff here, right? So what makes what you're doing different?
It's a great question. I think I just touched on it a little bit. I think because I've got, both Josh and I have a sales and a marketing background, but also understand the operations of what scale a business and the insight we've had. Josh has background in the kind of the software and the tech space and raising, seed fund and Series A and Series B. And I've worked for companies that's all been, owner-based, bootstrapping, reinvesting cash into the business, where we have this unique blend of business background and experience of, we combine, this is old, we're getting old, 40 years of combined kind of business leadership experience at the executive table and unique insight into, like hundreds of different industries.
That's right.
And then having this insight into being like, what's made those that have really been successful and scaled versus those that haven't. And we've just gotten behind the curtain, I think of very unique types of businesses. Then being able to say, okay, what has made that really work? And we've spent the last 6 months building that out, and it wasn't just something we came up with on the fly, but it was, Josh and I are both pretty strong personalities, Enneagram 8s. There was a lot of disagreement. It can be combustible when we're together, but it's really, really fun and exciting. I think also that what makes us really unique is that we, in this space, I would just say in the business coaching or even the online marketing space, we're full of integrity. It's
thank you.
Sometimes, you forget that just because it's like, it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things I know we could do to really grow and generate revenue right out of the gate that we just won't do. We're committed to whatever we build, and it's all about creating value and transformation for our clients. And there's things that don't make sense in the short term for us to scale the business that we just won't do. That we've got, kind of keeping the end in mind to say, I've got a very clear picture of where I want this business to be, 10 years from now, but I'm not going to shortchange that to generate revenue in the short term. And I just have always felt that way. You know, one of the things I learned with Michael, you know, is always play the long game. You know, and people jump into the online digital marketing space because it's like, man, I want to make money while I'm at the beach and all that stuff. And, you know, it's a lie.
Yeah.
You know, like all of this takes work. You know, this operation, you know, I'm here in your studio, like you got people working really hard behind the scenes to make this work. Like,
and they're amazing.
Yeah. This isn't just something you just turn on the cameras and the microphone and it looks awesome on the back end. Like this is a production. It's
Absolutely.
a lot of work. And thank you for, you know, Connor, here in the room. Thank you for your work. You know, it doesn't come lightly, I know. And it's, you know, being a fan and seeing on the other side and seeing the finished product is pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Know, and that comes from great people and also not cutting corners, where I think in this space people cut corners, and we're just not going to do that.
You know, I got roasted one time by my buddy Brad when I told him, I was like, the short way is the long way. The shortcut's the long way. He goes, no, the shortcut's the shortcut if it's the right one. Like there's always like, there's a, you know, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? So he's like, that's a shortcut. You know, I was like, okay, I get you. But like, again, it depends on, most people cut corners, maybe not out of pure laziness, but it's just, you know, you just have to do those things. And and
I think, you know, I understand his point, you know, is like, which that shortcut, you know, if you do it well, it comes from wealth of knowledge and experience and prior things. But if you don't have experience, you're just looking for the shortcut, it's going to be a really long shortcut.
And that was the other thing too. He's like, you know, he's like, you know, sometimes finding the shortcut solves a lot of problems. A better and shorter way to do things. I was like, all right, I get it. But still, you know, I guess when I said that the first time I was talking to my son, he may have been 10, and it was, you know, it's obviously, you know, I mean, it's like, you know how it is when they make their bed, and it's like, bro, like you can't just piling it in the middle is not making your bed. That's a shortcut. Yeah, that was what I was trying to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, you've talked about a lot about how. Like to win and do something great, especially the first time, that's what I've learned is like the problems and bumps in the road, the speed bumps are just a part of the journey, and you do learn from them. And the reason why it's everything compounds the deeper you get into it and the longer you do it is because of experience. And and those speed bumps become I guess they're like rapid. They're totally 10 feet apart at first, but they get further and further apart the longer you go into it, right? So Marcus Whitney told me one time as well, he's so smart, and he was like, you know, Nick, don't the biggest mistake people make when they look at me is they're mistaking their chapter 2 for my chapter 20. He was like, dude, once I got to where I'm at, like I got a whole new set of problems, right? I don't deal with the problems you deal with anymore, or the new entrepreneur does. I got a whole different set. Now I got to crowdfund and raise money and this and that and all that kind of stuff, right? So what advice would you have? Because most people quit. I've been on this big kick this year because it's been bothering me because I see so many people quitting so many things.
Yes.
And I don't quit, but I do finish. I've finished a lot of things and moved on to the next thing, right? So, but the problems are what make people quit.
Yep. Man, I love that we're taking this conversation here, you know, especially in, you know, with the mental health crisis we have in our country too. You know, and yesterday, you know, really famous, you know, Ellen's DJ decided to quit, you know, and don't know the whole backstory there, but, you know, Michael Hyatt always told us something similar to what what Marcus Whitney shared with you, is that you have 100% track record of getting through the hardest things in your life up to this point. And so, you know, understanding like that's a mindset that's like, man, and a lot of times, sometimes, you know, depending on your personality, you look back and you're like, oh, these are the 100 things I did wrong, or these are 100 things I did right. But guess what? Every road bump along the way, you figured out a way to get through it. That's and right. You're here standing on your 2 feet because of that. And when you can look back and say, I did that, that means it gives you the confidence right now that this may be the hardest thing that I'm going through, but maybe 10 weeks from now, 10 days, 10 months, I'm through it. And I look back on it and it's a learning experience, and it's something that's going to then be with me and shape me and is a scar that's going to help someone else. You know, outside of my Lord and Savior, everybody else that I look up to or idolize, for lack of better words or anything, none of them are undefeated. Yep. 100%.
Right. And, and that was, something that I think that was probably the hardest thing for me to learn wanting to grow businesses and stuff. I had no problem dealing with it as an athlete, and thank God I was an athlete, because that's why I was able to take those lessons and apply them.
Yep. And another thing, is I heard this from a famous pastor, especially in today's day and age with Instagram and, the shiny thing that you're seeing the best result, is that you're comparing someone's highlight reel to the junk that's in your heart and your mind, and the messiness that your marriage was this last week, and but guess what? That person's highlight reel, there's a whole other side to it.
That may be one of the most powerful things that's been said in here in a minute.
Wow.
That's absolutely very true. It's not always raw.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if the conversation that I had to have with my son this morning, if an outsider who didn't know anything had walk by and saw that or watch what was happening, they probably wouldn't think much of me at this point. You know what I'm saying? But it was an inside conversation, and there was all these things that led up to that moment.
Well, that's leadership.
Absolutely.
And whether it's leadership at home or leadership at work, those are not easy conversations to have. I'm not privy to all the details, but I mean that even in business and life, and as business owner and leaders, we've got to be willing to have those hard conversations, because, you want, something best for your son, and he's 13 years old. He doesn't know what's best for him yet.
That's right.
He thinks he does.
He knows what he likes.
Yeah. And the world tells him he knows, but he doesn't. We all know this. Like at 13, I had the world figured out.
I didn't know nothing at 23.
Yeah.
I didn't know much.
But you
at
thought you
27.
did. You thought you did.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of my boss at Thomas Nelson, this is something that has always just stuck with me. And I didn't like it when he said it, to me in my late 20s, when he said, is the moment you think you have it all figured out is the moment you have nothing figured out. And just think about that. When you start to think the world is this big thing, you start to be like, oh no, there's a definitive here. It's like, you no longer are willing to learn, which means you don't have anything figured out. This is a journey of learning. That's the life we're on. In
that's
business.
the gift.
Yeah, it's a massive gift. But and I actually framed houses when I was in college. So I did construction while I was going to school, and this company just really believed in young people, even though they didn't have any experience. You just had work ethic. Had give them a hammer, give them a tool belt, teach them a lot of life lessons. And one of the big things that I learned right away is, when they're giving you direction and instruction, your first reaction is to say, I know.
That's right.
And they did things to just take that out of you. Because the moment your body reacts to say, I know, is the moment you actually don't know anything. And you're just basically saying, I don't need your teaching because I have it figured out for myself. And I had no clue what I was doing, but it's your initial reaction to not take learning from other people.
It's a false sense of security, isn't it?
100%.
All right, let me ask you this, because this is going to be fun. So out of those 7 factors, you said most people they're at least doing the 3 million, they get that first level of success, they're doing 3 or 4 of those things. I bet you most of them get stuck in the same spot. Mm-hmm. All right, so oh man, I feel like I'm about to get called out right here.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, it's this is why it's the first one. It's the find your buyer, because you a lot of times if you're the CEO and you're doing $1 million to $3 million, you have probably generated most of that revenue. And what it took to generate this. So you think your buyer, you think all this stuff, but you haven't actually done the repeatable sales motion to clearly identify and allow someone else to come in and do it, which means, more than likely, people were just drawn to you as the CEO. They're not. You've created a narrative in your head around what that buyer is. So I have a client right now that's doing about 17 million in revenue. And they teach people how to find their buyer. And guess what? They don't know who their buyer is.
Gotcha.
And it's because they've hit a ceiling. They're in that $10 to $30 million range.
Okay.
And it's changed.
It's an awesome ceiling.
Yeah.
It's a big house.
Totally. It's a great ceiling, but the reality is you're so close to it. And they're one of the best in the space at helping people get clear around who they're serving. And it took someone from the outside like me to come in and be like, hey, actually, to get to this next level, which is that $30 million mark, you're stuck. And for 2 years, they've been stuck. And it's because they haven't changed who their buyer is. And their ceiling was a lot bigger than other people's ceilings because they had a great product and a great brand. But now they've hit a ceiling, and it really came down to find your buyer. And why find your buyer is first, because if that changes, everything else changes.
Oh man, absolutely.
The alignment around your brand changes, how to tell your story changes, your product line changes. And the moment they got clear to say, oh my gosh, you're right.
Yeah.
The owner had 4 other product ideas that one of them we've already generated $1.5 million in revenue to this totally new buyer in 4 weeks.
We, especially training insurance agents, it happens all the time. They're trying to sell somebody one product, and it's literally like walking up to, like, I don't know, a vegetarian with a big cut of meat and trying to get them to buy it from you. You know, like, it's like, dude, like, that's not. We say it all the time, like, that's not the customer for that. You know what I mean? That's not the customer for that. And most of the time, it's because they just didn't take the time to learn enough about the customer, find out what the need was that, or a problem that they had that this would solve, and then they never tell them how they're gonna. What the process in which how it's going to work and how they're going to solve that problem. If you
can live this life and understand that everyone's asking this question, what's in it for me, and you solve that problem for people, you're going to be ahead in this world.
All right. So let me ask you this, because everybody that's listening to this today is going to be like, man, I need that. I need some Chad. I need some Chad. And it's so funny that I made a confession on camera the other day, and my son is a big musician, and we listen to a lot of music together and everything else. And like some of the best sounding, like, he's a drummer by trade, so like he loves, and there's a band that everybody makes fun of called Nickelback. Yeah. And their drummer's really good, man. He does some really complicated stuff. It's a big sound and everything else. So I made a confession on camera that I liked Nickelback the other day. But I'm saying all that because the lead singer's name is Chad, and there's all these things. I love Nickelback because everything they get made fun of, they go along with it. They play along with it. It's great. And there's all these people imitating Chad, the lead singer. So now he goes and he puts his sunglasses on. He says, "You can't out Chad the Chad."
I love that. It's funny. I didn't know that existed. I mean, I know the whole story around Nickelback, but
there's a new one where they've all got like big waistlines. It's called Thickleback.
Yeah. I'll take their bank account. You can make fun of them all day,
dude. Absolutely. And it's funny, everybody hates on them, but like, I mean, I haven't seen a show that I couldn't find online where they weren't sold out. Like, yeah, it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. Everybody's going to have your haters, right? So, all right. So everybody's going to agree that they need to. They need to Chad the Chad. They need to work with Chad.
I like that.
So, how does one of the hardest things to do, especially as a small business, is one, identify I have a problem. The other thing is, like, most time when I identify I have a problem, solving that problem wasn't in the budget.
Yep.
Okay, so that happened. The biggest, I say this all the time. I'm a client with brand builders, and the only regret I have about working with brand builders is that I didn't do it sooner, 2 or 3 years sooner, right? Yep. So talk to me about, let's take that journey for these companies. Who is the ideal client for you guys? Where are they at in their journey, and so on and so forth?
Yep. Great question. Yeah. And that's the reality. I love that line where you said is like, man, when you identify your problem, whether that's in January or whether that's in September or June, more than likely you don't have the funds budgeted to solve that problem right then and there. And so most business owners push it off to the budget cycle. Those are the business owners that don't scale.
That's right.
Just tell you right now, those are the business owners that don't scale. We built, and that's a very easy thing to just say, oh, let's just put it off till next time. I'll do that tomorrow. That's basically what you're doing. And those people in your life that say, hey, put it off till tomorrow, you more than likely wouldn't hire them. You want them to take action today. If there's there's something that needs to be done, you want it done right now, tomorrow. And so as a business owner, first and foremost, if you see a problem in your business, take care of it now. Don't solve it later, because it will become a bigger problem. Whether that's employees, whether that's just something with you, take care of it today. Don't take care of it tomorrow.
Everything compounds over time, doesn't it?
No doubt. So, as far as us, we really are looking, kind of our tagline is helping you move from successful to scale. This isn't for startups that are looking to kind of build a business. This is for organizations that have already seen growth year over year, more than likely at least 7 figures, or at least a rolling 12 kind of momentum of 7 figures, up to 30 to 50 million. And the vision, obviously, if you're sub 10 million, you're kind of, hey, how do I get to 8 figures? If you're 8 figures, how do I get to 9? And our system is really focused on those two things. And the best way we do this is you can just go to scale-factor.co. There's a button that says schedule call, and we'll actually take you through a business scaling assessment. And you've heard my heart here. The goal is, hey, are you at the place right now where you need what we offer through ScaleFactor, whether that's a strategy session or whether that's through some of our other products? But if anything, we want that call to be the most valuable call you have that week. We're going to, diagnose your business and give you insight maybe that you didn't have otherwise, because, talking to business owners, very rarely do you take time out of your day to actually just think about your business. How often are you actually working on your business versus working in your business?
How long does a client work with you guys? Is it ongoing? Is it, is it periods? Is it short?
Yeah. So we have clients that'll bring us in for 1 or 2 day strategy sessions, or that'll work with us on a 12-month kind of retainer, which typically starts off with a strategy session where we get clear on, hey, where are things at? And then we have other scenarios where there's virtual options where we take 30 business owners through our model over an 8-week period.
Fantastic. I remember it wasn't that long ago when, I would hear or see something that I'm like, I knew I needed, but it was just like, I went back and forth on myself. Like, well, we're not to the point where it's not time yet. It's not time. I was always pushing it, just like you just said. And then finally, like, I realized that instead of saying I couldn't afford to do it, I couldn't afford not to do it. And I started doing what Robert Kiyosaki says in Rich Dad Poor Dad. All the things that I said I couldn't do then, I removed the statement and put a question mark at the end and started it with how. How can I do this? And I usually figured out that it just took a little time, a little thought.
Totally. Yeah, that's one of the things we'd always tell people. I mean, we would have this, managing a sales team, and the sales team would be like, oh, well, it's just not, I thought this deal was going to close. And then they said, oh, it's just not in their budget this year. Call me back in January. I'm like, oh, well, you lost that deal. They're not calling you back. When you call in January, they're just going to kick it down the curb again, or they found someone else because you didn't offer a big enough need in that moment. And that's a big differentiator. And I would say it's our job. Someone at Brand Builders probably showed you, hey, what's your world going to look like differently? And more than likely, there's things in your business that you can cut that aren't going to return the investment that something like, we do at ScaleFactor, what Brand Builders does, or things like that. And that's ultimately the decision you got to make as a business when you come across that problem and it's going to fix it. Are there things that you can cut that, maybe isn't yielding that type of investment? What we found is most business owners aren't doing that. They're not looking under the hood. You can easily find, if you're doing $1 million in revenue, what I would challenge you is, like, you can find 50 to 100 grand pretty easily. And I'm not even saying that's how much it costs to work with us, but you can find 50 or 100 grand pretty easily if you're doing $1 million business.
Absolutely. Well, man, this has been incredible, brother. Thank you so much for hanging with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Last question, and you don't know this is coming. So, let's say it's not for entertainment, for education purposes, right? So, top three books for the businessman or the business owner, and your top 3 favorite movies. For business. Yeah.
Wow. Put me on the spot. So, a book that I read every year is In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. Author is Mark Batterson. It's a pastor book. I know this is supposed to be business, but it's a book that's about, about this character Benaiah. It's got pretty much one verse in the book about it. But he basically goes into a lion's den on a snowy day and kills a lion. Okay, so you're on the lion's terms. You're in the and you kill it. And so what is it in your life that's you're wanting to do? I read that every year because it just gets me back to this kind of mortal, natural feeling of man, what do I want to change in the world? And that book just kind of recenters me.
Wow.
In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day. Great book. Measure What Matters. John Doerr.
We say that a lot. Count what counts, measure what matters, dude. Yeah.
It's phenomenal, where it's okay, it amazes me that businesses that are in $15 and $20 million, that there's not an agreed upon KPI dashboard that the leaders are looking at on a consistent basis and measuring performance and results. Blows me away that,
wow.
that one thing right there, if you are, even if you're doing $1 million, there should be an agreed upon KPI dashboard that's showing, KPI being key performance indicators if you don't know that. And that book really does a great job of helping you get clear on like what does matter and not having it be too many things. And then the third is Anything by Seth Godin. As a marketer, Seth is phenomenal. I think he goes against the current in the world and is 10 years ahead of his time. And so whether it's Purple Cow or Tribes or, Linchpin, all three of those books have been super instrumental for me. Now on the movie side, man, I wish I knew the name of this, but there's a documentary out there. And it's this guy, Tony Fadell, who basically built the iPhone and the iPod at Apple, kind of the name that no one knows. He wrote a book called Build, but he worked for a company, and if I talk about it, I'll remember it, hopefully. But they did a documentary about this company, and Tony was young, right out of college, and it was kind of pre-Silicon Valley. And they had the idea to basically build what is now the iPad, but it was 10 to 20 years ahead of its time, and the market wasn't ready for it. And there are so many business lessons from this podcast, or from this documentary. If you just Google Tony Fadell, Fadell documentary, it'll come up, and I'll actually Google it here in a second and come back to it. The other, like, I know it's not a business movie, but Gladiator. Again, there's something like powerful about
absolutely
as a man just watching that and being like, man, it just inspires me to think differently. And then this is another one, like Love of Baseball, like For the Love of the Game. That movie, I'm not normally a sentimental person, or emotional or in touch with my emotions. Marriage definitely helps with that. But that book or that movie came out when I was in high school, and baseball was like my love at that point. And when I watch that movie, I get back, there's just some powerful scenes at the end about like the things that matter the most to you. How are you going to remember them? And puts you in a frame of mind about, hey, how do I want to be remembered when I'm 70 and 80 years old? I want to be known as a good husband, a good father. Those two things are way before entrepreneur, good business owner, all of that, like good leader, that made an impact, and it's For the Love of the Game is all like every time it gets me to think bigger than myself.
Sure.
And think about my passions.
And Kevin Costner's good for baseball movies, I'm just going to say.
Well, it seems to be working for him.
That's right. Well, brother, is there anything else that you'd want to leave us with today as we bring the sucker to a close?
I think something we talked about at the end. If you're a business owner, and you're at a point right now where if you can see something that needs to be changed in your business, do it today. And I think the same thing plays out if you're not a business owner. If you're a leader inside of an organization and it's about your own life, do it. Don't wait. And you've been, you have 100% success rate at getting through everything you've been to this day. So don't give up. Power through.
Ooh, that's big.
Opportunities coming. All of us get an opportunity every day. We all get the same amount of time. We get the same amount of air as long as we're here, and so take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And I got to say one thing as I'm thinking about it, I was talking about my son and all the things he's doing and going through. He's a good kid, man. He's rocking. Like, we hold him to a higher standard than most. And and that comes with some pressure, and he's 13, man. He's 13, but we treat him like he's 23, I think, most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I just looked up that documentary. It's called General Magic.
There it is.
Watch General Magic. It's got so many great business applications.
Love it. Well, once again, we had Chad Cannon, the founder and CEO of ScaleFactor. Thanks so much for hanging with me again today, brother.
Thanks for having me. What a great place this is, and great people.
Well, you can check Chad out on Instagram at ccannon21. You can check out ScaleFactor on Instagram at ScaleFactor Co. Scale-Factor.co is the website, along with 7factorsofscale.com. That's the number 7, 7factorsofscale.com. Once again, folks, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of The Hitstreak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder. God bless.